So getting right into it, No Way Up is a movie involving a bunch of tourists who are on vacation to Cabo, and in the midst of the flight crashes into the middle of the ocean, and now we have a little bit of a chamber piece where they're surrounded by sharks. Now immediately I didn't recognize any of the acting in the movie besides this one guy in the movie, I'm not really sure of his name. He kind of plays like a prick in every single thing he's in, and no mistake, that's exactly what he's playing in this movie for the short time he's around. And going off of that, I was kind of ready to phone it in with this movie until the plane crash, but the plane crash was kind of pretty fun, to be honest. It had a little bit of gnarly practical effects. It kind of went a little bit overboard. It was very similar to Final Destination, so I did enjoy the plane crash. And as I said, after the plane crash, you're left with a little bit of a chamber piece where you have a couple of the survivors underwater in the plane, and they're kind of in a little bit of an oxygen chamber, and air is going to run out, so what are our survivors going to do? Now, sticking with that a little bit, the environment and the setting for this movie is pretty damn tense. I mean, you're underwater in a little bit of an oxygen chamber on a plane that's submerged in the water. Sharks are surrounding you. You can barely see because there's no light. It's kind of just a situation that makes you think when you're watching it, you're 50 feet from a ledge of plunging into 2,000 feet to your despair. This would fucking suck. Which immediately leads me to my first gripe with this movie, in that it's trying to be a traditional chamber piece where you have a bunch of people trapped in a small room. They're trying to work their way out and such. But every time somebody does a concept like that, it's pretty fickle with how much you can get the audience to buy into how much danger they're in, how interesting the solutions are they're trying to get out. And I feel like this movie just did not have a good balance of that at all. They did such a good job with making the environment and the setting tense that it almost gave the survivors like no chance to be intuitive or do anything outside the box. What I mean by that is when you're sitting 5 feet from submerging 2,000 feet into the ocean off of a cliff, you're surrounded by sharks, you can't see. You're left with this weird scenario where you have a bunch of survivors who are supposed to keep you interested because they're in a chamber piece, as I said, but they really have no options. So you've written an interesting dynamic to the movie. There's just no way for it to be dynamic because the people in the movie have no options. So what you end up being left with in this movie is a scenario where you'll have a survivor say, we need to do this. And another survivor will say, no, we can't do that. And it'll just kind of keep doing that because they're bouncing ideas off of each other that they can never actually act upon. So you're just kind of seeing people sit around for the majority of the movie. And don't even get me started on how that goes about with the survivors. The dialogue in this movie is actually just hilarious. You'll have two survivors looking at each other over and over again in every scene like, I can't do this. Yes, you can, man. We can do this. You got to stick with it. No, man, we need to swim for it. We'll never make it down here. We can't swim for it. We'll never make it, man. There's sharks out there. And that's legitimately half the movie's dialogue. It's just the same characters bouncing those ideas off of each other because they can never act upon it. If they go to swim out, they'll die to the sharks. And if they don't do anything, well then, yeah, they're not doing anything, so you're watching them sit around. And that's really one of the things with this movie. The sharks are so aggressive in the way they act that if the survivors even twinkle their toes in the water, they're basically going to get eaten. And there was a point in this movie I kind of questioned if it was even a horror movie or if it was like a comedy movie because nobody takes anything in this movie seriously. Most of the cast is like these comic relief dudes who no matter how dire the situation, no matter how much physical pain they're in, they just crack a one-liner no matter what. After the plane crash, there's a scene where one of the guys has a pretty bad break in his arm and they're like, we really need to cast you up, man. So they put it back into place, they put a stint, they crack it. And his first reply is, I'm never gonna play varsity. Like, dude, you're submerged like 5,000 feet under the water and you have a broken arm and the first thing you think of is a joke about baseball. There's another scene where a character loses their foot and he's just yelling like a narwhal for like 3 minutes, like, oh, like it's the worst cry ever. And when he does actually finally stop crying, he goes, hey guys, I can't feel my foot. And as an audience member, you're kind of like, I'm not sure if they're being serious because we can visibly see this guy hasn't had a foot for 2 minutes. And then lastly, the plane finally delodges. It's on the way going down into the depths, so you know it's an inevitable death. And the guy with the broken arm, he gets a beer to float up to him. He cracks it and he says, one for the road. It's like, as an audience member, it's just all over the place. Anytime there's a serious moment, you're like, is this movie like a dark comedy or is it like they're just going for comic relief because they feel like they need to inject it? But either way, it is so over the top with comedy. I'm pretty much laughing trying to recall it. And for the rest of the dialogue in this movie too, they do the same build up for every single conversation they have. Every single conversation stems something like this. Do you remember that time we went to the zoo? Do you remember that time you were in the 3rd grade? Do you remember that time when the dollar menu was actually still $1? And when you do finally get past the dialogue in this movie, it does seem like there are some decent action scenes, but it also seems like every one of those action scenes ends with some dramatic music like a Titanic theme song, which inevitably leads to a person getting ripped in half by a shark. I'm not even joking. 3 people in this movie get ripped in half by a shark while they're playing the dramatic music. They keep going right back to the well on that one. There's obviously some other stuff going on with the plot, but I'm going to keep it brief with this one. I mean, in the end, I didn't really mind this movie. I didn't love this movie. I'm probably not going to rewatch this movie, but I didn't hate this movie. You kind of know what you're getting with a movie like this. It honestly feels like a movie that was made for Tubi that somehow made it to the theaters. So yeah, overall, I mean, I would rate this movie meh. I mean, completely meh. I mean, I'll probably forget this movie, a week from now. I probably already forgot most of it. So yeah, if you did see this movie, let me know. Let me know if you thought it was as funny as I did, unironically. Feel free to comment down below. Leave what your favorite shark movie is, maybe. I don't know. Either way, feel free to subscribe. There's more videos coming my way. If you do want to see an actual piece of shit movie, though, that's over here. I'll leave it attached. Either way, have a good day, guys.